bird and like made fun of him. The next time he drove them, he hit the bird, and it like
bird exploded.
Yeah, it's funny.
Okay, here we go. So you should have some time again today as we ever nearer to testing day. Today we talk about WW2. So we already covered this. This is just sort of the initial actions. Especially interesting is Germany, which basically doubled its size without firing a shot. And the continuing appeasement, giving in, only encouraged Hitler to become more aggressive. American neutrality encouraged Hitler to become more aggressive. So let's focus on the European theater, the area of fighting. One of the things that Hitler did was sign a treaty with the Soviet Union. It was a non-aggression pact. Anyone want to take a shot? What does that mean? Right. I won't attack you. You don't attack me. Signed with the Soviet Union. If you would like to know why during World War II the Americans never trusted the Soviets completely, there's the reason. Right? The Soviet agreement to not fight the Germans. And now you're our ally when, of course, the Germans broke that agreement, which, by the way, everyone knew they were going to break the agreement. Hitler knew they were going to break the agreement. Soviets knew they were going to break the agreement. Why sign a treaty if you know you're going to break it? Very good, right? So now the Soviets can say, well, now we're justified in what we're about to do fighting against the Germans. Why? How about if you're the Germans? Why sign this treaty? You have no intention of honoring it. What? You're kind of on the right track. If you're the Soviet Union and the Germans invade Poland, they're heading your way, right? The Germans wanted the Soviets to relax. Hey, listen, we signed this treaty with you. We're not going to attack you. By the way, we're about to invade Poland. Don't worry. We're not going to keep going, which, of course, was a blatant lie. But they thought the Soviets would believe it. The Germans invaded Western Poland. The Soviets, by the way, invaded Eastern Poland. And Poland was once again erased from the map. This was September 1st, 1939. Finally, here's the act that finally got the British and the French to say, gee, maybe Hitler isn't going to stop. Maybe we should finally confront him about his constant reaching into the cookie jar. And they finally declared war. Test question. What was the event which finally caused Britain and France to declare war on Germany? The German invasion of Poland. September 1st, 1939. The strategy that they used was called blitzkrieg. Anyone know what it means? Besides Jack? And Will? Yes? Perfect, right? Let's go back to the American Civil War. The American Civil War, by contrast, by the way, I am synthesizing. By contrast, the American Civil War, the Union would capture land, mollify the local population, maintain a supply line to the north, and then capture land, mollify the local population, control the local population, maintain a supply line. Very slow, very methodical, very intentional. That ain't this. Blitzkrieg, let's roll. Let's go. Here we go. Don't worry about maintaining a supply line back to Germany. Live off the land. Let's roll. Just keep going. It strikes fear into the enemy. It makes them retreat because the retreating Polish know, okay, the Germans aren't going to stop to resupply. They're just going to roll. And it was three waves of German soldiers. How many of you are aware of this stuff? You're kind of World War II history buffs. Anybody? Yeah. Okay. So the initial German invasion, stormtroopers, man, they go. Wave number 2 was to control the local population, right? So the initial German wave, here we go. Followed by wave number 2, controlling the local population. followed by wave number 3. And if you were a Jew, that was the group you feared. Wave number 3. That's the group that rounded up the Jews and sent them to camps. And the world's largest Jewish population is Poland. Was Poland. Okay? That's Blitzkrieg. The 2 little words of war is because that's what finally caused war. What did America do about it?
No.
Nothing.
They were
right?
neutral.
The previous Neutrality Act that the United States had signed into law in 1937 barred trade with belligerent countries. Once Britain and France declared war on Germany, the United States was, by law, barred from trading with Britain and France, which you might think is the stupidest thing ever, right? Obviously, we're not going to side with Germany here. Can't we help the British and the French? And the answer is nope, because of a law that existed with probably good intentions. We don't want to get involved, but now the United States is on the sideline. 2 years later, once this law is starting, obviously the United States, the FDR realized, okay, this is an error. We do not want Germany to win because we're not helping our friends. And so this law was altered by an updated Neutrality Act, which created a step, right? If over there is we're all in, we're sending soldiers, we've declared war, and where I'm standing now is we're completely out, complete neutrality. You got to get there. You got to get from there to here. Okay, step 1. Step 1 is this thing called cash and carry. Anyone want to take a shot? What was it? Not him, and never, ever him. Cash and carry. The answer is in the terms. Cash and carry.
Take the cash and run.
Give them the cash and you get the trade like automatically right there.
Yeah. Hey, Britain and France, would you like to buy weapons from America? You got cash? And how are you going to get those weapons from New York to Britain and France? How are you going to get them there? Your boats. You send a boat across the Atlantic. You pay United States cash. We'll give you your weapons, and then you carry them across the Atlantic. Anyone know why? What do Germans have? Submarines, right? Best submarines on Earth. So you carry them. If the Germans sink a boat, it's not our boat. And since you bought the weapons, they're not our weapons either. Okay? So it's a step. It's a step. Of course, this helps our economy, helps us get out of the Great Depression. War is the health of the state. And so, again, another test question here. What ended the Great Depression? By and large, economists recognize it was World War II that helped the U.S. get out of the Great Depression. Okay. And so, again, I teased you about this yesterday. Would the U.S. conclude that a wartime economy is a way of preventing depressions? And if that's the conclusion, then shouldn't we stay on a wartime economy? And I will argue, by and large, that's exactly what's been happening. We have been in a wartime economy since World War II. Questions? I see some of you in here are not part of this class, but fine. Okay. So let's continue to look at World War II. So what this says is, sorry, I effed up here. This says 50 World War I destroyers. Destroyers. We sold Britain 50 old naval vessels from our Navy from World War I, right? So 19 teens technology to fight a 1940s war. Now, I'm not necessarily a technology buff, so I don't know the difference.
Who are they sold to?
Britain, right? In exchange, by the way, have any of you been to the American Virgin Islands? Caribbean, right? So here's Britain saying, hey, U.S., the Nazis are attacking us. Can we buy some boats? And we said, sure. Those Caribbean islands sure look nice. And the British are like, you're kidding. No, we got the Virgin Islands because we sold them boats. In exchange, they gave us some nice
Let me
islands.
give them old boats.
Old boats, right? Old boats.
We got cheated.
Yeah, it's a bit of, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, again, because of the German agreement with the Soviet Union, the Soviets were also aggressive. They invaded Finland. Yeah, it didn't go well, right? Finnish are pretty hardy soldiers, pretty cold up there. So they're being aggressive. The Germans also invaded Scandinavia. The area in blue will be the area that comes under German control in the year 1940-ish, right? So some of this is acquired based on that previous yesterday's slide, based on just acquiring it. Some of it is military invasion. This area here, Norway, Denmark, that's a Soviet invasion. Okay, so German invasion. German. I said Soviet. German. Italy's blue because they were an ally. Interestingly enough, though, by the way, the Germans never really trusted the Italians. Italy's got a bad reputation. Anyone know why? What happened? What did Italy do during World War I? Switch sides, right? They were on this side, and then they realized that side was going to lose, so they switched sides. So Germany and Italy were allies, and just to make sure, German soldiers occupied Italy. When the Americans, later on in this class, we'll look at the American invasion of Italy. When they drove up the peninsula, American soldiers didn't fight Italians. They fought Germans. The Italians had, by then, already executed Mussolini. And by the way, just to make sure he was dead, hung him upside down, then took him from town to town and let people throw rocks at him. And his wife. Isn't that lovely?
That's fun.
Other lines, the German invasion of France. During World War I, here's France, here's Germany, in essence. The French believed that the Germans would invade France by attacking right where the border was. So the French put their soldiers right at the border. What the Germans did was go around. They attacked Belgium, and then from Belgium attacked France. So the French learned. So before World War II began, the French, learning for World War I, put their soldiers between the French and the British line. So the Germans invaded Belgium and invaded France again. Oh, France. Successfully invading about half of France and set up a puppet government with French Nazis, I guess. Remember, all the while, there's three waves, right? The initial wave to take out the enemy army, the second wave to control the local population, the third wave to find the Jews and to eliminate them. And if you're wondering, why? What's this thing with the Jews? Remember, this is a continuation of the white man's burden, the empire argument that we had talked about in the previous unit. The Americans call it the white man's burden, so let's get the Indians out of the way. The Germans called it Aryan superiority, so let's get the non-Aryans out of the way. The Germans considered Americans, white Americans, fellow Aryans. The Germans considered the British fellow Aryans. There were British who supported the Nazi cause. In fact, I think this is right. There were rumors that the British king sort of sympathized with the German. Now, the British king has no actual power, but he sort of sympathized. And any of you see the King's Speech? Right now, I'm talking to a group of people who've never seen the movie The King's Speech.
Nope.
Rent it. In fact, I know it is. It's on Netflix. Watch it. Great movie.
In class.
No, but he ended up stepping down as king. He married a rich American, and he also sort of sympathized with the Nazi cause. Rumor has it. So he stepped down. His brother became king of Britain and was not sympathetic to the Nazi cause. Okay, it's kind of interesting. This next line here is the Battle of Britain, which was an air war. It was an air war, right? So the Germans would send bombers over Britain. Someday travel to London. Go see the most amazing church, St. Paul's Cathedral. And when you take that tour, you'll see damage from German bombers. They never took out the entire church, though, but they did damage it. Now, does that mean that the Germans were good with their aim or bad? Did they intentionally not take out this church, believing that by taking out this religious symbol, they would cause irreparable harm to their cause? Or did they have really bad aimers who couldn't quite hit it? I don't know. The British had something, by the way, that the Germans never quite figured out. Does anyone know? No, a technology. Radar. Yes, radar. The British had radar, right? The ability to detect enemy planes in the sky. And the Germans had no idea. And we'll talk about how that was a reality. Again, what we're doing is we're trying to figure out how did the U.S. go from complete neutrality to we're all in. And the first step was cash and carry. Here's the second step, a draft. We got to be ready. We got to be ready. No, we're not at war. We've never declared war on Germany. And so this is true. It's the first peacetime draft in American history. We were not at war. But there was a draft anyway. I'm curious, anyone here know of ancestors, relatives who fought in World War II in this room? I know my uncles did. You did. Okay. Do you happen to know where? Was it European or Pacific theater? You don't know. Do you know? Anyone know? Where?
Italy.
In Italy. Okay, very good. Okay. A meeting that took place in Cuba that the U.S. was part of. Basically, and this is kind of crazy, but here's where the U.S. made a promise to all the Latin American nations, don't worry, we're still going to enforce the Monroe Doctrine. Now, who just heard that and thinks, that's kind of weird, that the Latin American nations were reassured by the Monroe Doctrine? Like, oh, good. Whew. Do you understand? Does anyone... I like it. Nope. I do not understand. When the Monroe Doctrine was created, did Latin Americans look at it favorably? No. It's a justification for American invasion. Now, it's looked at favorably because America is our protector. Right? America is going to be there to prevent the aggressive Germans or any hostile entity from extending control into America. Okay. We traded with Britain beyond the cash and carry. It violated American law. Did anyone think about impeaching FDR? Well, probably, but did it ever gain serious traction? Can an American president break the law? When? In times of, let's phrase it, crisis. In times of crisis, a president can say, look, I know this law says something. Too bad. It's time of crisis. I'm going to violate it. Synthesis to our current president, who has argued that we need that wall. Congress never authorized the paying of that wall. His intention is to pay for it anyway. Violates American law. There's no funding from Congress to pay for that wall, but he's doing it anyway. And what's his justification? Time of crisis, right? They're invading. It's an invasion from Latin America. We need that wall. And whatever your opinion is fine. I'm not judging what you think of it. Okay. Any questions here? Let's keep going. Step 3. So if step one is neutrality, and step 2 is cash and carry, and step 3 is a draft, let's go with step 4, toward we're all in, something called the Lend-Lease Act of 1931. The Lend-Lease Act. And so you can see that there's this map, and the United States is in the middle, and then various black countries and kind of grayish countries with arrows pointing to them all. Anyone want to take a shot? What do you suppose it meant? Lend-lease.
lend weapons, and then they are in debt to us in money.
Very good. Okay, so we would lend to the countries that are in black, and to a lesser extent, the countries in gray. We would lend you weaponry, and lend you the money to pay for the leasing of our weapons. So here's the money. Now, would you like to lease our weaponry? Here you go. And we give them the money first, then they pay for the weaponry. And you might think, why? Why don't you just give them the weapons? Come on now. Because right, interest, right? If we lend you a tank, you can't pay back a tank and then a half a tank. There you go. No, we just want the money. We pay us back. Keep the weapons. Pay us back. Okay, and you can see that it was a very global effort, including, by the way, did you notice we helped Russia? We helped Soviets. This was after the German invasion of the Soviet Union. All right, last slide for today. You are looking at the German violation of the agreement between Germany and the Soviet Union. It was an operation called Operation Barbarossa. The Germans, violating what everyone knew what they were going to violate, but they did it anyway, invaded the Soviet Union. You have to understand the justification for this, you have to go back to this map right here. This map shows that Europe is largely blue, which means largely under German control. Yeah, there's a little bit of France that's a bit hostile. Spain's fighting itself. Spain was in the middle. Spain was never in World War II. Spain was in a civil war, so they're out. Britain's an island, and we're bombing the snot out of it. There is no Western Front. We did it. The Germans did it. They captured Europe. Now all they have to do is set up a defensive perimeter, set up a defense, a wall, fortress Europe. Now we're going to turn around and attack the Eastern Front. World War II, the mistake of Germany in World War I was two-front war. Hitler learned we cannot fight a two-front war. That's why we'll make an agreement with the Soviets. We're not going to attack you. We're going to focus on the Western Front. We're going to capture it. And then we're going to backstab the Soviets. No two-front war. And it looks like it worked. It looks like it worked. Okay. Before I continue, has anyone ever heard of this thing called the soft underbelly of Europe? Anyone ever heard that phrase before? The soft underbelly of Europe? Okay. I'll say it this way. Yeah, the Germans avoided a two-front war, but they didn't avoid a three-front war. If they don't have two fronts, what if we introduce a third front? Okay. All right, let's go back to our last map. Here we are. Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. You can see this dotted line is as far as the Germans got. They got within about an hour of the capital of the Soviet Union, Moscow. Okay, very, very successful invasion. This is some nasty fighting. And remember now, the Soviets are on their own. The British are busy. They're getting bombed over in Britain. The French are they're conquered. And I told you this already. The Germans made the French surrender in the same railroad car that the Germans surrendered to the French in World War I. Okay, intentionally. Hitler himself walked under the Arc de Triomphe. Any of you seen pictures of Paris? There's the Eiffel Tower. He personally walked through the streets of Paris just to rub it in. Oh, eat it! Eat it! And now he's going to invade the Soviet Union. Some nasty fighting here. Some of the battles. You want to read about some fascinating battles. Read about the siege of Leningrad and Stalingrad. I mean, unbelievable. The Germans surrounded, I can't remember if it was Leningrad and Stalingrad. I don't remember which one. Surrounded it and sieged it for a year. The people of the city were eating their dead. They were eating rats. I can't remember which one it is either, but there's a lake, frozen lake, to escape the Germans. So the Germans sieged the city, but they didn't bother surrounding soldiers on the lake because what? Are people going to cross the lake? They'll die. The Soviets built a train over the lake to escape. Why isn't that a movie? Okay. Opening the second front, but to Germans, it isn't a second front. We've captured Western Europe. This is not a second front. This is the one and only front. It's the only front that matters. Or so they think. Okay? It's at this moment. Remember now, the United States is not in yet. Pearl Harbor has not happened yet. Soon, but it has not happened yet. What is this? Step 5? Is this step 5?
Yeah.
Okay. The United States and Britain met and said, here's our goals. When we get involved, not if, when. It's only a matter of time. What are we fighting for? Synthesis. What was this for World War I? You're identifying one of the specific things, but the list itself,
The 14
the 14 points. Wilson saying, here's what we're fighting for. This is the World War II equivalent of Wilson's 14 points. When we fight, we are not fighting to capture territory. We are not going to militarily occupy any land where American soldiers land. Okay? One of the criticisms, fascinating, one of the criticisms is that after World War II, the French complaining about the Americans, and how the United States would fight the Cold War and send soldiers here and send soldiers there. And the American response was, there are plenty of Americans in France right now. Check out that cemetery. Look at all those dead American soldiers. There are the Americans in France. How do you like that, French? And by the way, you're welcome. You're welcome for what we did. Okay. Anyway, we're not here to capture land. We're here to promote democracy. We're not going to impose anything on anyone. Let people choose their own form of government. We're going to disarm the hostiles. Disarmament. And we need to replace the League of Nations. It is a toothless tiger. We need to make a new League of Nations with teeth. Today we call that thing the United Nations. It still exists. Okay. The end. Okay. Now, again, I will ask you to think about this. Did you hear anything today that would help you think about your Blue Book essay? Right? We didn't talk about Japan too much, but that doesn't mean that nothing you heard today would be disqualifying. You saw some bad German behavior. Couldn't you argue that if the Germans behaved this way and we didn't use atomic bombs against them, well, then why did we use atomic bombs against the Japanese who acted in a similar fashion? You could make that argument. Okay. Any questions for the cause before you're sort of on you time? Again, in your world is Blue Book essay prep, debate prep, a couple Kias are due Friday. Yes, dear.
Some of us won't be here on Tuesday.
I saw that. Well,
What's on Tuesday?
So, like, what if you already have an assigned, like, judge in person? Tuesday.
all right, rest of the hour is all yours. You have 20 minutes.
We're still an ensemble in Frederick. We leave at 6:30.
Your face is an ensemble.
And we leave at 6:30.
That was caught on tape.